Welcome to Karen Stories, where the wildest Karen encounters unfold. Get ready for hilarious, unbelievable, and shocking moments as Karens make the most outrageous demands. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to never miss a crazy story. Let's dive in. The moment she walked in, I knew. There's a certain type of customer you recognize before they even say a word. The ones who move like they own the place, like the floor should part beneath them, like the air itself should adjust to accommodate their presence. And Karen? She was the worst kind. The doors swung shut behind her with an air of finality, and suddenly, the entire energy of the restaurant shifted. Conversations dipped, silverware paused mid-clink. Even the waitstaff, the ones who had been in this business long enough to have nerves of steel, tensed ever so slightly. We all felt it. Her heels clicked against the polished wood floor as she approached the host stand, the sound sharp, deliberate. She carried herself like someone who thrived on control, her designer handbag tucked neatly under one arm, her other hand already raised mid-gesture, preparing to command. The hostess barely had time to look up before Karen's voice, honed to perfection through years of berating underpaid service workers, cut through the air like a blade. I want the best table, right now. It wasn't a request. It was a decree. The hostess, poor thing, swallowed hard, offering her best customer service smile. I'm so sorry, ma'am, but we're fully booked at the moment. If you'd like to wait at the bar, I'd be happy to, Karen scoffed loudly, loud enough that nearby tables turned, their curiosity piqued. No, she said, drawing the word out like it was some sort of joke. You don't seem to understand. I don't wait. The way she said it, like the very idea was beneath her, like patience was something only peasants and fools entertained, made my hands tighten around my tray. I forced myself to keep moving, keep working, but I could hear every word. I spend good money here, Karen continued, one manicured finger tapping against the host's stand like a countdown to destruction. I shouldn't have to wait. That's for people who don't matter. Her friends, three of them, draped in silk and dripping in manufactured superiority, laughed softly, like this was all some kind of performance crafted just for their amusement. The hostess hesitated, her grip tightening around the reservation book, her eyes darting toward the manager's office. A silent plea. But we all knew how this went. Karen types never walked out. They never accepted no. And, most importantly, they never left without leaving a mess behind. Sure enough, just as predicted, our manager, who had miraculously failed to notice every minor inconvenience workers dealt with daily, suddenly appeared, his customer service voice turned up to maximum charm. Ah, welcome back, he said, beaming like Karen hadn't just insulted one of his employees. I'm sure we can find something for you. Karen smiled then, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the victorious kind, the kind that let everyone know she had already won before she even had to fight. I exhaled sharply, willing the frustration down. It wasn't worth it. Not tonight. Not when I still had 3 hours left on my shift and a rent payment looming over me. But then, as I turned to grab a drink order, I heard it. Oh, Karen mused, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. And can we get a different waitress? I'd rather not have someone who looks exhausted bringing my food. My stomach clenched. The air thickened. My hands curled into fists at my sides. And I knew this night was going to be hell. I could feel Karen's eyes on me before I even reached the table. That slow, calculating gaze, the kind that wasn't looking at me as a person, but as a thing, a tool, an object to serve, to cater, to endure. I steadied my breath and approached with my notepad, forcing my expression into the blank, professional mask I had perfected over the years. Good evening. Can I start you off with something to drink? Karen's lips curled, amusement flickering in her eyes like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. She tilted her head, resting her elbow on the table as if she were preparing for a performance. Well, she drawled, exchanging a glance with her friends. You don't look very enthusiastic. Do you not like your job, sweetheart? The word dripped with mockery, her tone thick with insincerity. The way her friends chuckled under their breath only made my stomach tighten. I kept my voice even. I enjoy my job just fine. Would you like to hear our wine selection? She ignored the question entirely. Because, it's important to have goals, she continued, her voice just a little too loud, ensuring nearby tables could hear. You don't want to be stuck in a place like this forever, do you? One of her friends bit back a smirk, pretending to be interested in the menu. Another casually took a sip of her drink, her eyes glittering with anticipation. They were waiting to see if I would break. I didn't give them the satisfaction. We have an excellent Merlot tonight, I said smoothly, pen poised over my notepad. Karen sighed dramatically, as if I had just disappointed her in some profound way. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice just enough to feel intimate, but loud enough that I knew she wanted others to hear. She said, resting her chin on her hand, you have a pretty face. If you tried a little harder, maybe you wouldn't have to do this for a living. The laughter at the table came sharp, stifled behind delicate fingers and overpriced lipstick. My grip on my pen tightened, the words lodging deep in my chest like tiny, splintering shards. I had heard it before, the backhanded compliments, the condescending pity disguised as advice. The way people like her thought they were offering wisdom when really, all they were doing was twisting the knife. I forced a polite smile. I'll give you a moment to decide, I said, stepping back. Oh, no, sweetheart, Karen said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. We don't need time. I think I'll start with a martini. But do you think you can manage that? More laughter. My jaw clenched. I turned to leave, but her voice followed me like a hook digging into my back. And do try not to mess it up, would you? I'd hate to have to send it back. I forced myself to keep walking, every muscle in my body rigid, my pulse thrumming hot in my ears. She wanted me to react. She wanted to see the crack, the break, the moment where she had officially won. Not tonight. The moment I turned my back, I heard her voice again, sharp, dripping with amusement. Loud enough for everyone to hear. God. You'd think these places would hire people with at least a little personality. Laughter rippled across her table, the sound light, airy, effortless. It burned. Not because it was the worst thing I'd ever been told, far from it, but because of how easy it was for them. How they could turn me into their evening's entertainment without a second thought. I swallowed hard, refusing to let my steps falter as I made my way to the bar. Just get the drink. Just keep moving. Just let it roll off your back like every other time before. But then, that's enough. The voice cut through the restaurant like a knife. Firm, unapologetic. Everything stilled. The air shifted, charged with something new. A challenge. A disruption in the natural order of things. I turned just in time to see him, an older man, maybe in his late 50s, sitting 2 tables away. He set his fork down carefully, deliberately, before resting his hands on the table. His gaze, sharp and unwavering, locked onto Karen. You've made your point, he said, voice even, controlled. And it's a poor one. Karen blinked, as if the idea of someone speaking to her like that was a foreign concept. Then she scoffed, rolling her eyes. Excuse me? He didn't flinch. You've spent the last 10 minutes entertaining yourself at someone else's expense. We've all heard it. He gestured vaguely around the room, and only then did I notice it. The other tables, watching, listening, silent. Karen's friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of them looked down, pretending to fix her napkin, suddenly finding the tablecloth fascinating. A woman at the far end of the restaurant, dressed in an elegant navy blue dress, leaned forward slightly. He's right, she said simply. It's exhausting. Karen let out a breathy laugh, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Oh, for God's sake, are we seriously doing this? Over a waitress? The words sent a fresh spark of heat up my spine. Over a waitress. Like I wasn't standing right there. Like I wasn't a person. The restaurant exhaled, a quiet tension rolling off the walls. More people were watching now, heads turning, murmurs rising. A slow, creeping shift was happening, and Karen could feel it. Her confidence faltered. Just for a second. Just enough. The older man tilted his head, considering her. Then he smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You know, he said casually, you walked in here expecting to be the most important person in the room, but it seems no one agrees with you. Karen's lips parted, a retort forming, but it never came. Because at that moment, the first clap rang out. Then another, and another. The sound built, slow but steady, applause spreading like wildfire. Not exaggerated, not mocking, just genuine, quiet approval. Karen's face twisted, a mix of shock and outrage flashing through her carefully curated mask. She turned to her friends, expecting reinforcement, but they wouldn't meet her eyes. One of them was already reaching for her purse, subtly sliding back her chair as if contemplating an early exit. Karen's mouth opened again, desperate now, trying to reclaim control. But there was nothing left to grab onto. She had already lost. The applause wasn't deafening, but it was steady. A slow, building wave of acknowledgement rolling through the restaurant. Karen's face twisted. First confusion, then anger, then something else, something closer to panic. Her mouth opened, ready to fire back, ready to seize control of the moment and force it back into her favor. But she hesitated. Because for the first time, she wasn't in charge. For the first time, the power didn't belong to her. Her gaze flickered to her friends, desperate for backup, but they were already pulling away. One of them grabbed her purse and avoided eye contact. Another shifted in her chair, fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass with forced indifference. They weren't laughing anymore. Karen's armor, crafted from years of entitlement, honed by countless encounters where she had always been the one in control, was cracking. She turned back to me, and for a moment, just a moment, there was something almost human in her eyes. But then, just as quickly, the mask slammed back into place. "Oh, please," she scoffed, forcing out a sharp laugh. "This is ridiculous." No one responded. The restaurant held its breath, watching, waiting. Her fingers drummed against the table, nails tapping in an erratic rhythm. She was searching, scrambling for an exit that let her leave with her pride intact. The older man who had first spoken up leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "You were saying?" he prompted, his voice cool. Karen inhaled sharply, nostrils flaring. "I don't owe anyone an explanation." "No," he agreed. "But you do owe someone an apology." His words hung between us like a dare. Karen's face darkened. "I am not," she began, voice laced with venom, apologizing to a careful. The single word, spoken so quietly yet carrying so much weight, cut through the air like a blade. The restaurant exhaled as if bracing itself. Karen's mouth snapped shut. She was cornered. She knew it. Everyone knew it. The clinking of silverware, the shifting of chairs, the weight of a dozen pairs of eyes watching her every move, waiting to see what she would do next. I stood there, hands still curled into fists at my sides, heart hammering. I had spent years enduring people like her, years swallowing my pride, forcing down every bitter remark, every sneer, every moment of manufactured superiority. And now the weight of the moment wasn't on me. It was on her. Karen exhaled sharply, shoulders tensing. She looked at me, and for the first time since she had walked through those doors, she really saw me. Her lips parted, and for a split second I thought, "I'm sorry," she muttered. It was clipped, forced, like the words had to be yanked from her throat. But it was said, and just like that, the restaurant moved on. The energy shifted, the moment passed. Conversations restarted, silverware resumed clinking, the hum of normalcy returning. "Karen?" She pushed back her chair and stood, jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. "We're leaving," she announced to her friends, her voice sharp, desperate to regain whatever dignity she had left. They didn't argue. They simply rose, adjusting their designer coats, following her lead without a word. I didn't watch them go. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in a long time, I had already won. The door swung shut behind them, the heavy silence of their departure lingering in the air like the final note of a long, painful song. And just like that, it was over. Except it wasn't. I could still feel the weight of it pressing against my chest, the ghost of Karen's sneer, the echoes of her condescension curling around me like invisible chains. It was always like this. People like her came and went, leaving destruction in their wake, never bothering to look back at the mess they made. But this time, something was different. I wasn't the mess. Karen was. The restaurant, once thick with tension, finally breathed again. A few customers offered quiet smiles, small nods of approval. Someone near the bar muttered, "About time someone put people like that in their place." The older man who had first spoken up lifted his glass in my direction. A subtle toast. I nodded back, my grip on my tray loosening just slightly. And then, a slow, deliberate clap. It started near the back, one pair of hands, then another. The sound rolled forward in waves, soft at first, then building, until the entire restaurant buzzed with something I had never felt before. Recognition, not pity, not discomfort, not the usual glance away, awkwardness people displayed when they witnessed a server being humiliated by the wealthy. This was something different, something like respect. My throat tightened, a raw heat settling in my chest. I didn't need their applause. I didn't need their validation. I had fought my own battles for years without it. But for the first time, I realized maybe I wasn't fighting alone anymore. The clapping died down, conversations gradually resuming, the restaurant slipping back into its usual rhythm. But the energy had shifted. The air felt lighter, freer. My manager approached, expression unreadable, hands tucked in his pockets. For a second, I braced myself, expecting the usual corporate nonsense. "We can't afford to upset customers like that. You need to be more accommodating." Instead, he exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Take a break," he said. "You've earned it." I studied him for a second, searching for the catch, the warning hidden in his tone, but there wasn't one. For once, even he had nothing to say in Karen's defense. I nodded, slipping away toward the back, the hum of the restaurant fading behind me. Leaning against the counter, I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the tension slowly drain from my body. Karen had come in expecting to own the night, but she had left empty-handed. And me? I was still standing. I wasn't just some waitress. I never had been. And people like her, they were never as powerful as they thought they were.